Mark Twain got an honorary degree at Oxford with Rudyard Kipling and Camille Saint-Saëns, the composer, and someone asked him about how this kid born in the Missouri backwoods, felt about this honor. He said, "It was cool, but the clothes were even better, Mr. Jansen." Governor Spanberger, congratulations on this great honor and your historic achievement. One less William, and now a Mary. The Commonwealth is in good hands. We wish you every success. Rector Charles Poston, Chancellor Gates, President Rowe, other members of the Board of Visitors, distinguished faculty and staff, alumni, students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am deeply moved and humbled by this acknowledgement, that you might find what I have to say worthy of your attention on so important a day. Thank you. I'm just so happy to be caught up in your whirlwind for just an afternoon. Listen, many, many years ago, not long after I graduated from college, while working on my first film for PBS on the history of the Brooklyn Bridge and its great designer, John A. Roebling, I decided rather rashly that I had to interview the now late playwright Arthur Miller, and he had, after several pleading phone calls by me, rather reluctantly agreed. Miller had written, of course, a play called A View from the Bridge, and every edition of the book featured the Brooklyn Bridge on it. I was sure Miller would be able to shed some light on what I had come to believe was the greatest suspension bridge in the world, that remarkable amalgam of stone and steel, which after its improbable and dramatic construction became a source of sublime inspiration to artists and poets, photographers, and even filmmakers for more than a century, a symbol of strength, vitality, ingenuity, and promise. But on the long drive to Miller's Connecticut farm, I had picked up a copy of the play and discovered to my horror that there was not a single mention of the bridge in it. It was merely the background for a complicated family drama completely unrelated to the themes of my film. Students, clearly the timeless message here is do your homework. I was mortified, and it seemed like only a few panic-stricken minutes later that we pulled into his drive and I nervously knocked at the great man's door. The first thing a very, very tall and very imposing and very gruff Arthur Miller said to me when he opened the door was, I don't know a damn thing. He didn't say that. "You don't know a damn thing about the Brooklyn Bridge." I stood there for several moments in abject shame and my own humiliation, contemplating suicide. When he finally looked down and relented and said, "Okay, perhaps I can give you something. Come with me." Now, we had been planning to set up an elaborate interview around a favorite chair in his house or his office or his den, to take several hours to adjust the lighting, to film several rolls of film, but Miller wouldn't even let me into his house, directing me to his backyard, where the late afternoon shadows of a perfect fall day were lengthening. "Let's go now," he said, and we all knew he meant it. Clearly, in his mind, this was not going to waste any more of his time than need be, and we weren't going to be staying long either. We scrambled to take a quick light reading and put the 16mm camera up on the tripod. There was only a few minutes left on the roll of film that was still in the magazine of the camera from the morning shoot. The sound man fumbled with his reel-to-reel tape recorder, checking the levels. But now Miller refused even to sit down. He would do it standing up, or not at all. And we rushed to find an apple crate I could stand on to approximate his height, but of course never his stature. "Let's go now," he said again, clearly impatient with our, in retrospect, utter ineptitude. And we were completely flabbergasted. We had never done an interview where the subject wasn't quietly posed in some study or living room. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I can remember to this day the anxiety I felt to this day. Today, let us celebrate the messages the past, our common heritage, our common memory continually directs our way. Let us listen Too often as a culture, we have ignored this difficult but often joyful historical noise, becoming in the process blissfully ignorant of the power those past lives and stories and moments have over this moment, and indeed our vast unknown future. Today, our founding story, the most important event in world history since the birth of Christ, runs the danger of being smothered in fife and drum treacle, bloodless, sanitized, youthless. But I am interested in the power of an authentic history, and I am interested in its many varied voices, not just the voices of the old top-down version of our past, which would try to convince us that American history is only the story of great men, capital G, capital M. And certainly not just those pessimistic voices that have recently entered our studies, voices which seem to say that our history is merely a catalog of white European crimes. I am interested in listening to the voices of a true, honest, complicated past that is unafraid of controversy and tragedy, but equally drawn to those voices, those stories and moments that suggest an abiding faith in the human spirit, and particularly the unique role this remarkable and yes, sometimes dysfunctional republic seems to play in the positive progress of mankind. That, quite simply, ladies and gentlemen, has been my creed, my mantra, the lens through which I have tried to see our shared past, to understand its stories, its histories, for almost 50 years. It is my job to try to discern some patterns and themes from the past to help us interpret our dizzyingly confusing and sometimes dismaying present. Without a knowledge of that past, how can we possibly know where we are and, most important, where we are going? Over the years, I've come to understand an important fact, I think, that we are not condemned to repeat what we don't remember. That's a clever, even poetic phrase, but not even close to the truth. Nor are there cycles of history, as the academic community periodically promotes. The Bible, Ecclesiastes to be specific, that's the Old Testament, got it right, I think. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. What that means is that human nature never changes, or almost never changes. We have continually superimposed our complex and contradictory nature over the seemingly random course of human events. All of our inherent strengths and weaknesses, our greed and generosity, our venality and our virtue parade before our eyes generation after generation after generation. This often gives us the impression that history repeats itself. It does not. No event has ever happened twice. It just rhymes, as Mark Twain is supposed to have said. But maybe thanks to several Virginians and other patriots, there was something new under the sun on July 4th, 1776. You know, I have to admit that I have in many ways made the same film over and over again. As the film said, each one asks a deceptively simple question: who are we? Which is hiding, of course, the deeper, more complicated question, who am I? Who are those complicated people who like to call themselves Americans? What does an investigation of that past tell us about not only who we were, but where we are and where we may be going? Each film offers an opportunity to pursue this question, and while never answering it fully, of course, deepens the question with each succeeding project. Deepens the question: who are we? American history is a loud, raucous, moving, exquisite collection of noises that in the aggregate often combine to make the sweetest kind of music I know. And we have tried to listen to this music as much as we can in putting together the films we have made, the stories we have tried to tell. It is a kind of emotional archaeology that we are attempting, listening to the ghosts and echoes of an almost inexpressibly wise past that paradoxically in the end points us confidently toward those future horizons that will comprise our fate as individuals, as communities, as colleges, universities, as a country. Listen. One day, in January of 1838, shortly before his 29th birthday, a tall, thin lawyer, prone to bouts of debilitating depression, addressed the Young Men's Lyceum in Springfield, Illinois. The topic was foreign policy. At what point shall we expect the approach of danger, he asked his audience. Shall some transatlantic giant step the earth and crush us at a blow? Then he answered his own question. Never. All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa could not by force take a drink from the Ohio River or make a track in the Blue Ridge in the trial of 1,000 years. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide. It is a stunning, remarkable statement. That young man was, of course, Abraham Lincoln, and he would go on to preside over the closest this country has ever come to near national suicide, our Civil War, and yet embedded in his extraordinary, disturbing, and prescient words is a fundamental optimism. Do you see it? That implicitly acknowledges the geographical force field two mighty oceans and two relatively benign neighbors, north and south, have provided for us since the British burned the White House in the War of 1812. Lincoln's words that day suggest what is so great and so good about the people who happen to inhabit this lucky and exquisite country of ours. That's the world the students here inherit. Our work ethic, our restlessness, our innovation and our improvisation, our communities and our institutions of higher learning, our suspicion of power. The fact that we seem resolutely dedicated to parsing the meaning between individual and collective freedom, what I want versus what we need. That we are also dedicated to understanding what your alum Thomas Jefferson really meant when he wrote that mysterious phrase, the pursuit of happiness. Hint, it happens right here in lifelong learning and perpetual improvement this institution is committed to. But the isolation of those two oceans has also helped to incubate habits and patterns less beneficial to us. Our devotion to money and guns and conspiracies, our certainty about everything, our stubborn insistence on our own exceptionalism, blinding us to that which needs repair, especially with regard to race. Our preoccupation with always making the other wrong at an individual as well as a global level. We must be on guard and never toss the baby out with the bathwater. I am reminded of what, thank you. I am reminded of what the journalist I.F. Stone once said to a young acolyte who was profoundly disappointed in his mentor's admiration for Thomas Jefferson. It's because history is tragedy, Stone admonished him, not melodrama. It is the perfect response. In melodrama, all villains are perfectly villainous and all heroes are perfectly virtuous. But life isn't like that. You know that in your guts, nor is our history. Thomas Jefferson, your alum, for all his flaws, distilled a century of Enlightenment thinking into one of the most important sentences ever written. Inspiration for centuries of revolution and the expansion of rights and justice. But the late historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr. was fond of reminding us that we suffer today from too much pluribus and not enough unum. He was right. Few things survive in these cynical days to remind us of the union from which so many of our personal as well as collective blessings flow. And it is hard not to wonder in an age when the present moment consumes and overshadows all else, our bright past and that dim, unknown future, what finally does endure, what encodes and stores the genetic material of our civilization, passing down to the next generation, the best of us, what we hope will mutate into betterness for our children and our posterity. History holds one answer. Nothing in our daily life offers more of the comfort of continuity, the generational connection of belonging to a vast and complicated American family, the powerful sense of home, the spiritual as well as material benefit of shared sacrifice, the freedom from time's constraints, and the great gift of accumulated memory than does an active and heartfelt engagement with our collective past. To this day, I do not remember what feeble question I asked Arthur Miller. It doesn't really matter now, I suppose, but Arthur's few-sentence answer constituted the sum total of the interview, and it has stayed with me, like the panic, the rest of my life. He said, You see, the city is fundamentally a practical utilitarian invention, and it always was. And then suddenly you see this steel poetry sticking there, and it's a shock. It puts everything to shame, and it makes you wonder what else we could have done that was so marvelous and so unpresumptuous. It carries its weights. It does what it's supposed to do, and yet, they could have built another Manhattan Bridge, and Roebling didn't. He really aspired to do something gorgeous. So it makes you feel that maybe you too could add something that would last and be beautiful. That was the whole interview. Maybe you too could add something that would last and be beautiful. Those words became the final words of my very first film. In a way, they became like the declaration of principles the young and still idealistic Charles Foster Kane tacks to the wall in Orson Welles' great masterpiece, Citizen Kane, my guiding principle as well. I am not sure how well I have been able to live up to the creed Arthur Miller so generously gave to me that afternoon, but I could not help but think of his words again as we gather together today. It applies to all of us, young or old. Do something that will last and be beautiful. It doesn't have to be a bridge or a symphony or a book or a business or the United States of America, as Jefferson, Washington, Madison, and Henry could claim. It could be the look in the eye of a child you raise with love or in the simple garden you tend. But above all, do something that will last and be beautiful. Thank you.